Okay, welcome everybody. It's nice to have you here. And today I'm going to share with you what I think is probably one of the most important things in terms of how to understand your experience. This is something that has come up recently. A lot of people have been asking about this. They want to understand, what is all of this? What is going on? What is the nature of this experience? How do I understand it? What do I do about it? And so I thought I would explore that a little bit with you. And so what is the benefit of understanding all these things? Well, the benefit is then, as usual, coming back to the intention of these meetings, which is that it's self-realization. So it's about knowing who you are. It's about knowing your powers, and it's about knowing your relationship with reality. And when you know these things, then apart from the obvious superficial benefits of you get to have more of what you want in life, which sounds pretty good in and of itself, but there's also more fundamentally and more important than that, it removes the fear. So if you really take a look and see what's the real problem that you're experiencing in your life, it's fear. It really comes down to that. You're afraid that you're not going to get what you want. You're afraid that you're going to hurt. You're afraid that you're never going to figure it out. You're afraid that nothing's ever going to work out. You're afraid of all these things. And until you resolve that fear, then nothing else is going to be enough. If you think about it, what else, what could possibly resolve that for you? It's not going to be money. It's not going to be sex. It's not going to be power. It's not going to be any of these things that you think it's going to be. You can't have enough Ferraris or enough mansions or enough travel or enough adoration or enough of any of these things in order to really satisfy what is hurting you, which is that fear. So resolving that is the most important thing. And that's why I emphasize self-realization, because only when you know who you are and you know what your powers are and you know your relationship with reality can you actually resolve that fear. When you resolve that fear, then suddenly life takes on a whole new dimension. Then instead of it just being about avoiding fear, you actually get to be present and alive and giving of your gifts. There gets to be an expression of joy in your life. And that's what's actually possible. And that's what you're actually here for fundamentally. So understanding what all of this is, understanding what your experience is and what's going on is really important in that process, because if you don't understand that, then you're really going to be struggling because you're kind of living in a fundamental ignorance of what's really going on. So that's what we're going to explore today. So the first thing that I want to say is that you may have heard this phrase that the map is not the territory. If you have not heard that phrase, then today's talk is going to be probably possibly mind-blowing to you. And if you have heard that phrase, then you might think you know what that's pointing to, and possibly today's talk will also be mind-blowing to you nonetheless, because I'm pretty sure that you, no matter whether you've heard that phrase or not, you probably have not really understood what it's pointing to. So the phrase, the map is not the territory, is really important to understand, because a lot of the time we're operating as though the map is the territory, and I'll explain what that means. So we operate based on maps and models. You're not operating based on what actually is. You're operating based on your map or model of what is. And this can be very useful. It's also potentially very problematic. And so it's useful in the sense that it allows us to function. It's problematic when we've omitted or distorted something or generalized something in a way that leads us to wrong conclusions or leads us into problematic situations or into conflict. So we have to have maps and models, because otherwise it's too much. We couldn't function. So if you've ever had an experience of oneness, then that experience is very delightful and joyful, blissful, and that's fine in and of itself. It's in some paths that's the ultimate goal, and I guess in some way in all paths it's the ultimate goal. But for many of us, in and of itself, that's only part of it, because we also have desires that we want to fulfill here. There's a reason why we exist in this form. There's a reason why we have this life. There's a reason why you don't just check out completely when you have some sort of transcendent experience. You keep coming back here because there's something drawing you here, and that is that you have unfulfilled desires. So in order to fulfill your desires, you have to take action in this world. You have to do things. You have to experience things. And that involves some sense of movement. It involves some sense of action. So in order for that to happen, there has to be some sense of a territory. There has to be some sense of the ability to progress towards something. And so that means that we then create this sense of there being a territory, that there's time and space, and there's characters, and there's distance, and there's action that needs to take place. So there's a whole drama that unfolds. Now, at that level, we need models and maps in order to navigate that. So imagine for a moment that you want to go from wherever you are currently to somewhere on the other side of the world. Now, how are you going to do that? You could just start walking. That would be one way to do it. It's probably not going to be the most efficient way to do it, right? It would probably take you a pretty long time to arrive at the other side of the world if you were just started walking and wandering. Eventually, it might work out for you, although most places you would actually have to do something other than walk unless you can walk on water. But nonetheless, if you just start walking, eventually you might end up at the other end of the other side of the world. But again, it's not the most efficient means to get there. So if you want to actually end up there in the most efficient way, you're probably going to want a map. So now think about, so that's the value of a map, is that the map, it allows you to navigate. It gives you just enough information that you can get from where you are to where you want to be. Hopefully that makes sense. That's why we use maps. So just in the very everyday mundane sense, we use maps, right? I mean, now people use GPS, but it's the same basic concept, right? You have a map, and that helps you to navigate from where you are to where you want to go. So we probably all understand the value of having a map. And a model is just another way of understanding the same idea, where it's not the actual thing, but it's a representation of the thing. Okay, and that's useful for us because that way, for example, if I say to you, chair, presumably, if you understand the word chair, then you know what I'm talking about. Now, when you think about a chair, you know what I'm talking about, but what are you actually looking at there? What are you noticing? What are you experiencing when you use that word chair? Is it a very specific chair? Is it the chair you're sitting in? Probably for most of you, it's not. It's a representation. It's a model that will substitute for just about any chair. You could recognize any chair based on that model that you have. And that's really important because if your understanding of chair was just one very specific chair, if it was just the chair you're sitting on, and then you went somewhere else and somebody said, pull up a chair, you wouldn't know how to function because you wouldn't know what they were talking about. Because for you, it would be the chair in your home. And if they say pull up a chair, you'd scratch your head. You'd say, what are you talking about? I can't do that. The chair's at home. I'm here. But you have a model that allows you to know what they're talking about. They're talking about a chair, not the chair at home, but a chair. And you can recognize a chair because you have a model, right? So you can go anywhere in the world and you can recognize a chair, even though some places a chair might look like a stool. And in some places it might look like a lounge chair. And in some places it looks like a kitchen table chair. And in some places it looks like an office chair. And in some places it might look like a tree stump. But you can recognize a chair anywhere you go because your model allows you to do that. It has that flexibility. So that's, again, the use of a map or a model, is it allows us to function because it leaves out detail. So think about this. If you had a map that had all of the detail of the territory itself, it wouldn't be a very useful map. because then you just basically have the territory. It's not a map anymore. It's the territory itself. The reason you want a map is because it's not the territory. Because the map allows you, it leaves out detail because all of that detail is overwhelming. You have a specific goal in mind. You want to get from point A to point B. The map gives you just enough detail to allow you to do that. Of course, you'd want to know which type of map you want for that purpose, right? So if you're going to travel by road, then you probably want a road map, right? So the right kind of map that has the right kind of detail is necessary in order for you to achieve what you want. But regardless, the map leaves out a lot of detail, and it should. Otherwise, it's not a very effective map. The same with the model, right? As I already demonstrated. So if your model of chair is one specific chair, it's too specific. It has too much detail, and it doesn't allow you to then generalize it to all chairs. So your model should leave out enough detail so that you can actually use it functionally for what you're wanting. If you're wanting to be able to recognize chair in a general sense, then you want to leave out all the unnecessary details so that you can just simply recognize chair in all of its variety. And this is true of all things, right? So we can possibly start to see where we get into trouble when our models are too specific. So if you have a model that says uh, human being, and that model is so specific and narrow that it excludes many people, then can you see how that might get you into trouble, right? Because then you start to have this idea that there are some people who are not human. So we want our model to be without any unnecessary detail so we can apply it in an effective way to reach our goals. We want our maps also to leave out enough detail so that they can help us to achieve our goals. So that's the value of that. Now, the thing is, we're always operating from maps and models. You're never operating, or I should say, it would be very rare for you to operate from the territory itself. So you might have familiarity with this idea of mindfulness. Mindfulness, this is my interpretation. Mindfulness is encouraging us to do with fewer maps and models when possible. And there's a benefit in this, but we have to use it intelligently, okay, skillfully. But even if you're extremely mindful, in order for you to be functional, you're still working from some kind of map or model. So mindfulness might allow us to start to, because mindfulness is more attention to the detail, more attention to what is, less reference to the map and model, more attention to what is. So that allows us to fill in some of the detail that otherwise would have been missing from our map and model. And that has benefits, but it cuts both ways, because when we're doing that, then it allows us to be more aware, but we're going to be, in some ways, it's going to compromise the level of efficiency. Now here, it depends on, there's a reason why we might find that our map or model is not as efficient as we want it to be. And so we can use mindfulness in order to gather more information so that then we can develop a new map or model that will allow us to be more efficient in our desired outcome. But in that process of focusing attention on the detail, on the territory, on what is, we're going to be compromising our efficiency in terms of achieving a particular outcome. So we just want to keep this in mind, that we want to have this full range of capacity. We don't want to cut ourselves off from any of it. We want to be able to use our maps and models because they help us to achieve our goals, because we have unfulfilled desires. We want to fulfill those desires. Using maps and models efficiently, intelligently, allows us to do that. It's part of what it is to have the human experience. We don't want to cut ourselves off from that. We want to continue to have that capacity. In fact, we want to expand that capacity. We want to be able to use all of our capacities and functions fully. And at the same time, we want to recognize the limitations of the maps and models so that we don't run into trouble. Now, as I say, we're always working with maps and models. So even when we're filling in more detail, we're still working with maps and models. It would be extraordinarily rare that you would not be working with a map or model. In fact, I will suggest that the only time you're not working with a map or model is when you are in a state of a transcendent state of oneness. And even though there is a possibility, so there's something called sahaja samadhi, which is when one is in a state of oneness and still functioning in the world, but there's nobody functioning. There's nobody there. There's only oneness, but there's the appearance of functioning. So there's no longer any individual there. So this is like Ramana Maharshi. This is if you when asked, Ramana Maharshi reported that this was the experience, was sahaja samadhi. So that is a possibility. But for the rest of us, uh, for the majority of us, what we're going to be dealing with is maps and models most of the time. So we want to start to have an understanding of the maps and models, and we want to work with them intelligently. So now think about what a map or a model is. So it's something that exists in your mind. It's a representation, and you perceive it. So think of chair. And notice how you are aware of chair. I'm not talking about a specific chair. I'm talking about the model of chair that you have. How are you aware of that? So for most people, it will be most likely for most people, it will be predominantly visual. There may be some felt or kinesthetic component. Rarely, if somebody is very dominantly auditory in their way of in their way of processing things and representing things, there may be some auditory component, like a sound of a chair, whatever that is. So if for you, there's some sound that is associated with chair that represents chair, it's possible there's a sound. It would be very unlikely, but theoretically possible that there could be taste and smell representations for chair, but given the nature of chair, it's unlikely. So for most people, it's going to be primarily visual. Most of us probably process chair primarily visual, but it could be for different people, there could be other aspects of that representation. Now, however you represent that, notice that you actually can have awareness of it. So it actually exists somewhere. That model actually exists somewhere. In order for you to have awareness, it exists somewhere. So you represent that somewhere. And this might be an odd idea if you've never explored this before, but if you have, it won't be that odd. So you can just notice that you actually have awareness of it because it exists somewhere. You've given it a location. So there's somewhere in your sense of space in which you experience this representation of chair. And if it's visual, you could actually notice what it is. Like, does it have legs? Does your chair have legs? If so, how many legs does it have? Now, your chair might not have legs. But if your chair does have legs, you can be aware of that. You can notice that your chair has legs. Does your chair have cushion or no? Right? You can just notice these things. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just to notice how you represent chair. And you do this with everything. So, for example, think of door. You have a model for a door. Is that model for a door every door in the world? No. Not every door looks exactly like that or feels exactly like that, but or sounds exactly like that. But that model of door that you have allows you, it's like a summary representation of door for you that allows you then to recognize door wherever there is one. And we're doing this with everything. So these are objects, you could do this with you do this with any object. So foods, right? Apple, orange, banana. You can recognize an orange if you know what an orange is, even though you've probably never seen that orange before. And if it was a, if it was a, uh, and then we could extend that into citrus, right? So then you could recognize any citrus, whether it's an orange or a grapefruit or a lemon or a lime or any variety of citrus, you could recognize it based on that model that you have. And then we do this with not just with physical objects, but with other abstractions as well, right? So we're doing this with everything. So our whole world, our whole reality, our whole experience is actually experienced through these maps and models. And these maps and models are experienced through the five senses. So have you ever experienced anything apart from this? And what I will suggest to you is that you have not, that your entire experience is maps and models in your mind that you experience through your five senses. Now, the implications of this are vast. Because what this means is that you have the ability to determine your experience entirely, 100%, nothing excluded. You don't usually realize that because you don't realize that you have the ability to control or change your maps and models. You think that the maps and models are some objective reality outside of yourself that you have no ability to change. You think that other people are happening outside of you. Now, they may or may not be happening outside of you, but the thing is, you're not experiencing those people outside of you. Even if they exist, what you're experiencing are your maps and models of those people. So think about it. Every person that you know, how do you know that you know that person? Because you have a model of them. That the person you think you know doesn't exist any more than you can't find if you look on Google Maps, look up anywhere on Google Maps, and then try to find exactly that in out there in the real world. You can't. It doesn't exist. Because what you have is a map. It's a representation. It's not the thing itself. Remember, the map leaves out detail out of necessity. So you might have the map it represents something, right? You could find something on the map, and then you could go to the location that it represents, and you could say, well, gee, it matches up pretty well. This map seems to be a pretty good representation. But the thing is, the map leaves out the detail. Has to. Also, the map, by and large, is static. It's not dynamic. It's not a living thing. Whereas the reality is dynamic, it's living, it's not static. So you right now think of some person you know who's not in the same room as you, and you think you know that person, but how could you? That person, the so-called objective person, the person out there, they're not in the room. You're not actually knowing that person, you're knowing your model of that person. You think you know the person, you just know a model of the person. So guess what? This is really good news because if you have any problems with that person, you don't. You just have problems with your model of the person. Now, if you're thinking that you have to change the person in order to be okay, you're going to have a lot of problems because you don't get to do that. But if you start to understand that all you need to do is change your model, suddenly things become a lot easier. Or at least, let's put it this way, they become manageable. Whereas trying to change things that you don't have access to and that you don't even know exist is pretty unmanageable. But most people spend their whole lives trying to do that. Think about that for a moment. Most people spend their whole lives trying to change things which they don't have access to. And by the way, they don't even know exist. And they make their entire okayness dependent upon those changes. It's all conditional, right? I'll be okay when these external things that I don't have access to and that I don't even know exist change in the way that I think they should. And then you can start to understand why so many people are so unhappy because they're trying to do something that doesn't, it's total fantasy. It doesn't exist at all. And the irony, I guess, is that people have it inverted, right? They would say that what I'm proposing is fantasy and that they're living in the real world. Whereas in fact, there's no evidence whatsoever of the reality of what they call the real world. The only evidence that we have, the only reality we have, is that which we actually experience. And what we actually experience are maps and models. Now, to a certain extent, we could say that we could say there's a greater reality that allows us to fill in the details. Whether that greater reality is outside of us or not is not, I would argue, no, it's not, but I don't even want to get into that today because that's a whole other thing. Today, I just want to keep it focused on this. So, but we could certainly update our maps and models as appropriate and needed, and that can be very useful, right? Because so I'll give you an example. Years ago, this would have been like almost 20 years ago, hard to believe. There was I wanted to go somewhere, and I had the brilliant idea that I would print a map from Google Maps with directions and go there by car. And I did that. And then as I was driving, I turned off on a road that the map told me to turn off on. And I started driving on that road, and I said, gee, this is not a very well-maintained road. And then as I kept driving, I said, this road is getting even less well-maintained. And then I kept going, and I said, this road barely even really would be considered a road at this point. I'm not even sure that there is a road here at all. I can't say that this is a road of any kind. And after a while, I realized that this was probably not the good way to go. This was probably not going to actually help me to get where I wanted to go. So I backed up all the way and found a different way. So sometimes this is what happens. Okay, so we've got maps and models, and we find out that they're really not working very well for us. Now, the intelligent thing to do when that occurs is to update your map or model. It's the intelligent thing to do, but it's not something that most people know about. And so, unfortunately, not many people do that just out of ignorance because it's not something that we're taught. Like, at least I was never taught that in school. If they're teaching that in school today, that would be great, but I don't think that they are. I don't think that's something that's taught in most schools. So I don't think most people are getting that information, that it's possible to update their maps or models. but it's enormously valuable, can save you an enormous amount of stress and pain in your life if you update your maps and models. So so here, just to recap so far, so you're living your life with maps and models. That is what your experience consists of. And that's useful to you because you have unfulfilled desires. And the maps and models allow you to take actions to fulfill those desires. So if you have no desire and you want to just merge into oneness and experience that bliss, then please do that. That would be fantastic. I mean, that would be wonderful, and it would be very fulfilling for you if that was the case. But for most of us, that won't work because we have unfulfilled desires. So what can happen is you can possibly learn to have that kind of transcendent experience. So you can achieve that through various means. People do that frequently through various means. The only way that I can recommend for doing that would be through meditation. And meditation is a word that I don't usually like to use, just because it's not particularly useful or meaningful. So I'm using it here, and I'm not going to define it too well, other than just to say there are certain techniques that can reliably produce states of oneness, transcendent states. So if you learn those techniques, then you can have those experiences reliably or semi-reliably. And that's interesting and possibly useful, but it's also possibly problematic. It's problematic when a person believes that that's the actual solution to all their problems, and rarely is it. Because that's the solution when the only problem is a lack of merging with oneness. Okay, if that's the only problem, is you say, you know what, I have no other problem. Everything else is completely satisfied and resolved. The only problem I have is that I'm not merging with oneness enough. In that case, then the solution to that is merge with oneness. But if you have other problems, if you say, well, I really want to experience greater health. I really want to experience more financial stability. I really want to experience more harmony and success in my personal relationships. I really want to experience success in this particular creative endeavor. I really want to experience having children and being a good parent. I really want to experience fill in the blank. If you want to have these experiences, then having a transcendent experience is not going to directly move the needle on those things. I'm not going to deny that it might not have some benefit, but the benefit is only in the sense that it can give you a broader perspective that can allow you to recognize that you're working from maps and models, and that you might need to update your maps and models. It might allow you to realize that you need more flexibility and adaptability. But beyond that, it's not going to directly help you to achieve those goals. It's not going to directly fulfill those desires. So as long as you have those unfulfilled desires, guess what? You're going to continue to come back to this experience here in your maps and models until you resolve those. A lot of people are trying to find a way around that, and it doesn't seem to work out very well. So if you figure that out, please do let me know. If you find another way around that, I mean that sincerely. I would really, really sincerely like to know, because I don't want to, my intention is to provide the most useful, efficient means to achieve true satisfaction in life, completion, fulfillment. That's my intention. I'm not interested in being right. I'm just interested in providing truthful information that's actually helpful. So if you find if you find another way around that is legitimate, that actually works, that gives better results, please let me know. But until and unless I have that information, what I can tell you from my own experiences, there doesn't seem to be another way around that. So if you are finding that you're trying to find a way around that, if you're trying to just check out of your life and avoid dealing with your maps and models, and you don't want to try and update any of that and improve any of that, and you want to just keep it all the way it is and try to just avoid it and check out and just think if you can just have enough transcendent experiences one day, you won't have to wake up into this reality ever again. I'm pretty sure that's not going to work. And and also I'm quite certain that what will work much better is to actually satisfy your desires. Not all desires, because most of your desires are not yours. And that would just be a long process, right? So if you don't actually want the mansion, then it would take you a significant amount of energy and time in order to manifest the mansion. But it's unnecessary if it's not truly your desire. Okay, but if it is your desire, and you have some desires that are truly yours, those are the things that keep bringing you back, then I'm suggesting satisfying those will give you much better results. So find out what are the things you want, truly want, and then learn to organize yourself in a way that you can achieve those most efficiently and effectively. And what I'm telling you here today is an important part of that. It's not the whole picture, but it's an important part of that. That's why I'm sharing it. So obviously I talk about other things at other times. Those things are also useful and important, like knowing what you want, putting your attention on what you want, discovering what are what's the resistance, the limiting beliefs, learning efficient ways of releasing those and resolving those. All that's important. But what I'm sharing with you today is more at like a more fundamental level. It's understanding how all of this is structured so that you can start to really understand what's going on. And it maybe will help to fill in the gaps and make more of this make sense, unless it confuses the hell out of you. But in which case, forget about it. You can just tune out and go listen to the other videos, which are more useful, right? Because that's fine. You don't necessarily need this information. But I think for a lot of people, this can be very useful information just to understand that you're working with these maps and models and you can change them. So in order to change them, think about it. Just like if you're using Google Maps, you can switch from street view to terrain view to satellite view. There may be other views. I'm very, like 2005 in my technology understanding, but as I understand it, you have those views, right, that are available to you. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then that's okay. Just take my word for it. So you can change the view to get different information. So we have the same kind of ability within ourselves. We can change the view to get different information, but we can go beyond that, which is we can actually update things in order to make it more useful for us. So it may be that our maps and models are not as they're not as they're not optimized for helping us to get what we want. So we have to, so this does in some way tie back into what do you want? So let's think about this, just to make this a little bit more down to earth. Okay, so let's say you have a desire to have more harmonious relationships, and let's make it specific to a desire for more harmonious relationship with a particular person. Okay, so there's a particular person who you would like to have more harmonious relationships with, and you're not experiencing that degree of harmony that you would like. Okay, so there's a desire there. It's presently unfulfilled. And then you can just pay attention and notice, okay, so every time that I am experiencing conflict with this person, what's going on? What leads to this conflict? What are the steps that take place that results in this conflict? If I don't know that, then it's going to be really difficult for me to make any change, right? I mean, I actually want to have that information. Then what I can find out is, based on that information, this will help me to know how can I improve that. So then I can notice that my maps and models are what are leading me to have those results, those experiences. Just like that experience that I described when I had that map and I turned on that road, and that road was not a good road to get me where I wanted to go. That road was leading to the top of a mountain, and then it stopped. There was no further road. That was not my destination. I was trying to go somewhere else. So if I just kept following that same map over and over and over and over, what's the likelihood that I'm going to get to my desired destination? And the answer to that is not good. So if I want different results, I have to change something. I have to change the map that I'm using so that it can deliver me to a different location, preferably one that I want to get to. So I have to actually use the information that is given to me intelligently, and then start to survey the land, as it were, and make some updates, right? So just like I did in that experience where I turned down that road because the map said to, and then at a certain point, I started to realize there's a discrepancy here. The map is saying this is going to give me my desired results, but what I'm actually experiencing is showing me something different. So then I need to go back and I need to update my map. Now I couldn't, this was back before I could just, get an update online. But because I was in, it was like, this is antiquated stuff, this is back in the day before all the GPS and everything. So I was just driving in my car without, I just had to look at the road and look at the road signs and things and maybe stop someplace and ask for directions. But nonetheless, there I was, and I could get updates, and I needed to update my map, my internal map, as it were, so that I could get better results. So I need to do the same thing in the rest of my life. That's the point I'm making. So if I'm having these experiences in my relationship where I keep having this same kind of conflict, and I'm not noticing what's going on, basically it's like, okay, so my map says turn left, go on this road that's not very well maintained, that leads to this place that's not where you want to go. And then I end up there and I'm like, oh, here I am again in this unhappy place. Who's to blame? I am, because I keep doing it. I can get really upset. I can blame everything and everybody else. But what the intelligent thing to do is to actually, but again, you didn't know this. Nobody knew this. None of us were told until now. Now you know. But before now, you probably didn't know because hardly anybody knows this. But think about how powerful this is. So so when you meet with failure or frustration in your life, that's just feedback letting you know that your map or model is out of date. And you have the ability to change it. How do you do that? Well, when you know where you want to go, then you can just go back to the point where you last had certainty that you were well on your way, that you know, I'm on the correct path. Then you notice, okay, so my old map had me turning this way. And at that point, things start to go south. So now I know, don't turn that way. That is not the right direction. I need to update my map. So, and the really good news is that we actually have built-in GPS. Okay, so in my relationship, think about this. So if I know what my destination is harmony in terms of this relationship, right? I know what I want. I want harmony in this relationship. So I'm going along and I'm paying attention and I'm noticing, okay, is it harmonious? Is this harmonious? Yes, it's harmonious. And then all of a sudden, whoops, not so harmonious. Okay, well, don't go any further. Back up. Here's the point at which I last knew that I was on track. Now I have good information. I can update my map. I'm now going to say, don't go that way. If I go that way from now on, it's because I'm just making just a poor decision. So I now have that information. Now I want to know, okay, now following my inner GPS, where is harmony? And at a certain, sometimes our brains will say, I don't know where it is. I have no idea where it is. I'm lost, I'm clueless. But here's a way you can frame this that can be really helpful. Just play along as if you can know the answer. Play along as if you really do have an unerring inner GPS that can tell you exactly where harmony is. Because actually you do. You do have that. So if you just play along as if you do, and don't believe the thoughts that say, I don't know, and I can't know, and I'll never figure it out. Just play along as if you can and you do, and then you can and you do. And it will, and then you can update your map. And what will happen is now you'll know exactly how to do it. And then you can repeat that over and over and over until it becomes so easy and second nature, you don't have to think about it at all. Just like, think about this. Whenever you have certain routes that you take over and over and over in your life. If you walk or you drive, right? Or you take public transportation. So you go places, you go to work or to the store or wherever you go, and then you go home. And you have certain routes that you take. And maybe you have, like route A and route B, it's like the scenic route and the non-scenic route. But you have a couple of routes that you usually take, right? And you don't have to think about it. You're not agonizing and stressed out about, oh, do I turn this way? Do I turn that way? Have I missed it? You don't have to because it's in you. You don't have to think about it. It happens almost automatically. So when you've updated your inner map and you've repeated it a few times, you don't have to think about it anymore. So at first, if I have a desire for harmony in this relationship, and my old map has me going this way that leads to lack of harmony, then as long as that's my familiar way, and I haven't actually done the work necessary to update my map, then what I'm going to tell myself and I'll tell other people is, oh, it's so hard. It's just so hard. I don't know what I can do. I don't know what I should do. I just keep finding myself here and it's all their fault and it's all this thing's fault and it's all life's fault and it's just so hard. And other people will say, oh yeah, it's so hard. I know exactly what you're talking about. Poor you. It's so hard. But the thing is, when you've updated your map, you want harmony, right? I mean, if you want harmony, then it's not hard. You just haven't developed the habit of it yet. Once you've developed the habit of it, why would it be hard? You want it. Like, what's hard about feeling good? Is there anything hard about feeling good? I mean, as long as you're feeling good, is that hard? It's not hard at all. When you're feeling good, you don't say, oh, gee, this is so hard. You only say that it's so hard when you're just in the habit of doing something based on an old map or model that you haven't yet updated and you haven't done the work and even been willing to admit what's going on, and they say, oh, it's just so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. It's a bullshit excuse. And I'm saying that with loving kindness. I mean, I'm not saying like you're a bullshit excuse. I'm saying that is a bullshit excuse that we've been taught. And we didn't know, right? So you were innocent in the whole matter. So it's not like you shouldn't feel bad about it. You just didn't know. But now you do know. And now you can do it differently, which is really good news. So what this means is that, and I just want to be really clear about this because sometimes people have doubts and confusion about this. They say, well, so what does this mean? Like, what does this mean that the only thing that I can change is my inner perception? Well, kind of, but think about what I've just said from the beginning, is that that's your whole world. Everything is your inner perception. What does that mean? What's the implication of that? That means you can change everything. Everything, 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 everything. I'll say it one more time just in case it wasn't clear. Everything. But you have to start there. Start with your maps and models instead of thinking that the outer things have to change, right? It's like, so if I'm back to that example, if I was, 20 years ago, I'm driving in my car with my printed out Google Maps, and it says, and it's like, said to turn this way. This is definitely the road it said to turn on, but this doesn't look like it's it. So if I'm thinking that the road should change, then that's going to be problematic for me. And this is where a lot of us get stuck, is because it's all within ourselves, but it's just that we're focused on the wrong aspect of it. We're focused on the outcome instead of the cause. We're focused on the result rather than the cause. Okay. So if I'm there, I've turned on the road and I'm thinking the road should change, it could happen. I'm not going to, anything could happen. I mean, there are ways to make that happen, but that's harder, way harder. And that's what most people are doing. They're making it really, really hard on themselves. So you can have success with that, but you're making it really hard. Versus all I really needed to do was back up, look at the road signs, ask for directions a few places, and I can end up where I wanted to go. What was my goal? Was my goal to make that road different? No. My goal was to end up where I wanted to end up. So if I'm fighting and struggling to make that road change, I could make it happen, but I might still be there today, still trying to make it happen. Right? I mean, it's possible if I stayed with it long enough, I could make it happen, but it might take a long time and be really difficult. And ultimately, that's not what I wanted. So people get hung up on this. They think the other person should change. Is that what you want? Are you sure? Are you sure you want the other person to change? Just check in and find out what you actually want. Because if you're sure that that's definitely what you want, you can have it, but it's probably going to be hard. Versus if what you actually want is harmony, guess what? You can do that way easier. You don't make it conditional. When you make things conditional, that's the hard thing. If I say, in order for me to get where I want to go, I have to only get there on this road that currently doesn't exist. That's hard. But if I'm clear that what I actually want is just to get to where I want to go, I can get there using the roads that do exist. And so that's the thing, is just be clear about what you want and then update your maps and models in alignment with that. Because if you tell the truth about it, you're here to fulfill those desires. You're not here to make things as hard as possible. But most of us have been taught, inadvertently at least, that what we're here to do is make things as hard as possible. Because everybody out there seems to be just trying to make things as hard as possible. So again, just to recap, to me, this is really fantastic news. And I know, there's a lot of words, blah, 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 to say something really quite simple. But if I just said it straight out, then you'd say, yeah, whatever. Doesn't make any sense, doesn't help me. But if I use a lot of words, then maybe it starts to sink in a little bit, and then you realize, wow, this could really make a big difference in my life. So the summary is this: that you are living from maps and models that you experience through your five senses. They're not objective, it's subjective. You have the ability to modify those maps and models, and you can do so that they align with what you actually want. And I really encourage that, because if you're doing anything else, you're making things hard on yourself. And I did give at least one example of how that would play out in life. I'll just briefly give you a few other simple, quick examples, just in different domains, so this can be clear. Because sometimes people get hung up on this stuff. I know it's like, okay, so I can see how that might work in relationship, but how on earth is that going to work in any other area of my life? Okay, so think about finances. So people think, oh, they create all kinds of conditions, and this has to do with their map, right? So they think, well, in order to, and their models, right? So in order to get the Well, we can even take a step back. Why do you want the money in the first place? Because a lot of the time people, when I talk with people, I say, what do you want? They say, well, I want a bunch of money. Okay, why do you want the money? Well, because I want freedom. Well, why do you want the freedom? Well, so I can do these things. Oh, okay. Well, so why have you created those conditions for yourself? If what you really want is to do those things, why did you say that first you need the freedom and before that you need the money? Why don't you just do the things, right? Do you see how that works? We've created multiple conditions for ourselves because we think I need this in order to have that, in order to do the thing that I want. But what you want is the thing you want. So just focus on that. And then find out, see, this is, again, what I mean about the maps and models. So if you have a map inside that says, I want to get to this destination. This destination is I want to do these things. And your map says, in order to get there, I need to go way over here and I need to get a bunch of money. And in order to get a bunch of money, I need to go way over here so I can do these things that I don't want to do. And then once I've done those things, then I'm going to come way back over here. And then I'm going to do some more things that I really don't want to do. And then I'm going to go way over here. And then by then, maybe I'll have some money. And then I'm going to do this other thing. And it's like, holy cow, you're not doing the thing you want to do. All because your map, right? So how about you learn, just go direct. It's possible, and you'll be much happier that way. Because if you just learn that, okay, what do I want? What's the most direct route to the fulfillment of what I actually want? Learn to eliminate the unnecessary stuff, all those detours that you didn't actually want to take, where you go down the dark alleyway and get mugged a dozen times. That's avoidable. Just stop doing it. Um, and so it's, and then you just keep noticing, like, okay, so I keep doing this. I keep turning this way. I keep taking this action, and it results in something that's undesirable to me. Take a look and update your map. Just all you have to do is just pause, back up to the last known point where you were on track, and then just notice, okay, what did you do to get off track? What was it that you thought? What action did you take? What were you believing? What image were you giving credence to in your mind? What were you doing that then led you down that unhelpful detour? Learn that, get that information, update your map, and realize, okay, whenever I encounter that, don't go that way. It's like a new road sign. It's like, this is the way to hell. Oh, great, good to know. I won't go that way. If the road sign is clearly marked, it says this way to hell, and you go that way, then at least you know what you're getting yourself into. And you can't blame anybody else or anything else at that point, right? Because it's like, there it was, you chose it. It clearly marked hell this way, and you did it. But when you've done that, when you've marked it clearly for yourself, you won't do it anymore. Then you'll know, oh, this is where I want to go. This is the way. So you can update your maps in that way. You update your models by removing the unnecessary prejudices and unhelpful thoughts and beliefs as you've applied them to people and things. You know, if you think this person is an unhelpful person and you want a harmonious relationship with them, how is that going to work out well for you? It's not. Why do you want to do that to yourself? So you just want to update these things. Because the thing is, it's not true. It's just not true. It's just something that you have, it's something that you constructed that model. And if you don't like the model, you can change it. By the way, you can do this with your model of yourself. I didn't even mention that. That's amazing, isn't it? Because you have a model of yourself. That's a whole other conversation. That's like 100 conversations right there. So I won't get into a lot of detail, but I'll give you that for your consideration, that you have a model of yourself that you could also update, right? So if you have a model of yourself that says, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm no good, I'm unsuccessful, how's that working out for you? And probably not very well. And you can change that. So I know a lot of people are going to probably say, but how do I do that? How do I do that? Well, okay, so I understand that's probably another dozen or 100 conversations to go into all the depth and detail, but I also want to be clear that I'm not leaving you hanging here. You have what it takes to do that. I actually have told you how to do it. I haven't given you every last little technique and detail on how you can accomplish that, but I have given you the basic premise, and you have the skills and the power to do that. How? Through the power of your awareness. You just have to bring awareness and intention. So if you have the awareness will allow you to recognize, just like I said, it's like, oh, when I do this, I get that undesirable result. Well, isn't that interesting and useful information? Certainly should be, right? So then just back it up and then notice, okay, so from here, given that I want what I want, so this is my last known point of clarity, my last known point when I was on track. From here, let me orient myself to what I want. Then let me take a step in that direction. Get some feedback. Find out, is that a good step? If so, great. Then again, orient yourself to what you want. Take a step in that direction. Just keep doing that. If you go the wrong direction, then you'll get feedback, and then just come back to the last known point where you were on track. See how that works? It's pretty simple, right? You just keep taking steps, getting feedback. It's actually feed forward in this sense, because you know where you're going. So based on that, as you take a step, then you're based on that information, then you're noticing, okay, have I gotten closer or further to my destination? If I'm closer, then that's giving me information. So that's all I'm going to say for today. For those who watch this on YouTube, I want to give a little bit more information. So if you are interested in joining these meetings live, you're welcome to do so, and you can get that information by signing up on my website at joeylott.com. I've also recently included a free book that gives clarity on the 5 fundamental laws that you need to understand in order to master creation. And so that's available on my website, joeylott.com. And I'll provide a link in the description below on YouTube. And also, if you're interested in more guidance and support on this kind of thing so that you can achieve what you want in your life using the simplest, most direct, most efficient methods and processes that I know of, you may be interested in the Manifesting Truth program that I offer. It is a paid program, and you can learn more at joeylott.com/manifesting-truth. And so for those who are here live, I'm happy to stay on for the group coaching. And to those who are watching on YouTube, blessings to you all, and I will see you next time.